Happy birthday, little bastard. Not better. Welcome to Welcome to Silly Whales. This is a mental health podcast. My name is Alex Cupid. I'm joined by my long-term best friend. Well, you're one of 4 best friends, really. You know, you're part of the group, man. Hold me together.
Yeah, it's good.
You know?
Glad.
Joe Kimber.
I'm glad you're not relying on me alone.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Honestly,
I am the one that is emotionally depended on. I can't do the emotional dependency.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, this is a mental health podcast. We discuss heavy topics. This podcast is for everyone, but it might not be for you, and that's okay. There's plenty of other happier podcasts out there, and I recommend JRVP with Anthony Jeselnik and Greg Rosenthal because it's a funny podcast, and you guys should all be listening to it. We do discuss things that might be somewhat triggering, like mental health, all of the conditions and how they affect us. Things like self-improvement, which is the topic of today, really, and how we go through changes. So if that is in any way, shape, or form not your vibe, we're not going to hunt you down. Neither of us can drive. In Joe's case, he can't park. So, you know, you're safe. And also, we just don't do that.
Nah, we don't care. Honestly, don't give a shit.
Yeah. Today is Silly Whales Presents, and then that means it's a very dialed-in episode. That means we're not going to go off on tangents about taking over the universe or headbutting a star. Okay, all it is we have a topic and we're gonna delve into it. And Joe, can you tell us what today's topic is?
It's about self-worth, Alex.
Whoa!
I
know, right?
I've always wanted to find it. Here we go.
To find it. You found it?
Yeah. I thought we would I thought this is all our discussion was going to be. It's like our plans of finding self-worth. Is that not it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's go on the journey, man.
Let's start planning now. You know.
Yeah. What is self-worth though? What is self-worth in your ideal scenario, situation, or life?
Yeah, I personally wanted to. I wanted to start by almost saying I'm not sure, but I feel like self-worth and what we're kind of going to try and find is it's different from self-confidence, right? Like if I had to guess at how we both feel about it, I wouldn't call it self-confidence, which I think is a thing, but I don't think is the same, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that you can easily think they're similar or like conflate the two.
Yeah, because you can be like really confident in yourself, but not think you're worth the time in, or like, you know, from other people or even within yourself.
Yeah, you can think you're competent, right? But just not actually meaningful, I guess, in some larger sense of it. I definitely think there's overlap though, but there are distinctions. Since you asked me, I'll take a shot. I think if I had to sum it up, is the feeling of mattering or the feeling of relevance. Does that make sense? Not necessarily again in that competency way, but in a sense of feeling like you yourself are happy with what you are doing or who you are or what you're kind of providing and so on, right?
Yeah.
Whether it to be to yourself or others, basically. It's quite abstract in that sense, or quite broad.
Self-worth is how it applies to you in certain moments, right? Like the way I view professional athletes' self-worth as just as important as their actual physical worth. Because there's so many professional sports players who are really good and are considered the best, and they crumble due to their own confidence issues. And we call it confidence, but like we don't really go deep into what makes that player confident, you know? So he might be going through some really like terrible stuff in his personal life. Maybe the idea of being a professional footballer is great on paper, but the realities of it are quite tough. So they no longer feel like they're valued by themselves. So then they don't play as well because they don't have that same feeling like what they do actually matters to the world. And then all of a sudden they start tanking, and then they end up in League Two, and then they're playing in the Northern Premier South, and we all cry.
It's definitely a perspective, right? Or at least it feels like it's a perspective issue. Is issue the right word? I'm not sure, but like it feels like it comes from a place of perspective. How really? Because it's quite a subjective thing, which I think is why quite a lot of people, regardless of their objective situation, can feel like they lack it or don't lack it. I think probably there are people in the world and cultures in the world where, like, it's not that there isn't a way of talking about it, but there are probably people that if you went up to them and said this word, like, and they could understand what you meant by it, they probably wouldn't know what the actual term means, or they couldn't like define it. Like, I think it's quite hard to define for a lot of people who may have never had to think about it that much.
Yeah, like I think self worth is. I think everybody thinks of self worth, but whether or not they actually take account of it and factor into things is a different thing entirely. Like I've met
Right.
loads of people who don't really look at things like confidence and self worth and concepts of mental health and mental stability as real things. So it's very binary in the sense of I need to do this, so I'm going to do this, but they won't factor in how they mentally feel about it or how they emotionally feel about it because there's just no actual, them as people. They have a few, they have conditions themselves. So it's not having an emotion or not having a feeling towards it is having an emotion and having a feeling towards it.
Right. It's just not something they can like uh extra not extrapolate. It's the other word that basically means to explain. They can't explain it necessarily. They
Yeah,
can't talk about it, but they
they can't
but
really
they
comprehend that passage really.
yeah, what's going on back there. It's just
But
they feel one way or the other.
But yeah, like so our versions of self worth, and this is me talking for both of us, has always been like coming from the idea of from a social aspect, is us believing that we actually matter in the world that we're in.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we splinter individually off into our different versions of self worth, but like at its fundamental core, it's trying to understand that we do matter in the world we live in, and that there are people around us who are like who love us, and we need to acknowledge that they love us and like fully believe that they love us.
Yeah, I do think there's levels to it. There's almost like a Maslow hierarchy of needs element where there's bits of there's elements of self-worth where it's like, you know, am I doing something that I feel is important or is providing or is, has some kind of like maybe moral or like personal satisfaction, for example, and doing something like that and then feeling like, hey, I'm doing something that's worthwhile versus something that's like I'm, am I even worth loving? And things like that. Like a completely different like section of it is about like is about am I someone who is being cared for or by anyone or should I be cared for? Am I essentially am I doing enough for people to care about or for me or what or whatever? I think a lot of those. I think there's delineations of this that you could probably go down. There's probably something that I'm not even aware of unless I was to think about it more of another kind of worth, which is completely separate from those two. I think those are the main two for me, at least, if I had to guess. If I had to say like what two stand out for me, in the way in which I think all the time about things like that. I think those are the two that stand out to me.
Yeah, like I feel like for me as well, those definitely stand out. I think for me to now delve a little bit like deeper into the personal side of things, like for me it's always been about am I a liability in that regard?
Yeah,
Um a lot of the time and I take it back to sports for that reason, because there'll be times where I'm playing a game of football and my positions on the pitch were always vital positions. Like every position is technically vital, but playing in goal and being like a defender, which are the two positions I play mostly as a goalkeeper, your self worth is very fragile as a child, especially. So when you make a mistake, you think of yourself as a liability to the team you're with. So then you don't believe you're of the standard to be there. You don't feel like you're worth anything to them, and that they want you gone. And that's a
yeah,
mindset that's followed like me in a social way as well. I'm always like, these people will be better off without me. So I look to subtract myself from situations where everything's okay because I don't actually feel like I belong there because I'm not off the same caliber there.
what you just said made me realize that you could probably delineate it further, which is, and I don't know how to describe this, but I'm going to have a go. Um, is there kind of like a positive and negative version of these things where, like, you could have a positive, like, feeling, you could feel sort of in a way, I'm or sorry, you can have issues in in two ways, which is the idea of not feeling like a burden and then feeling like you matter, almost as as separate ideas. Where you know, I'm the goalie. Am I being a burden for the team in the way that I am, or am I, a member of society who is, giving more than I'm taking away, or whatever in the way that you think? Or is it, and then you can have another version of it, which is, am I, am I providing enough for this? There's no burden here in the sense that there's no, I'm taking something from them. It's more like, yeah, I'm doing what I'm trying to do, what I need to do. Am I doing enough? Basically, it's less of a case of burden and more of a case of, am I providing enough? A sort of more positive idea, not in a positive as in good, like happy, but positive as in trying to add on, versus the idea of trying not to be negative, not trying to be a minus on something. I'm sure you could say that they definitely have like overlap to them in any moment, but I almost wonder if there's like a way in which people might have more of one and less of the other in terms of what they're dealing with at any moment in time.
Yeah, I think I think it made me, what you said made me realize like how situational it all is and how precious it
Yeah.
is as well. Like, like, have you ever had a moment where like you felt pretty good about yourself and then it gets snapped away from you like really quickly?
Oh yeah, it's there's nothing eternal about it. It's completely changeable. It's it to talk about like the value of self worth for a second. It's interesting because to an extent, it's not valuable. It to because it's not like something that we can like hold on to and it sticks around for. It's one of those things that's constant. I think there is a constant need to have it affirmed, but it's not something that really. It's not like something that's a trophy that I can put up and go, I feel I have good self worth and then kind of move on from. Like, it's not like good habits, for example, where it's like, I'm keeping up good habits. That's good. And I can feel good about that because that's like a recurring thing. And obviously that can change from time to time, but you can in the moment go, okay, well, this is something I normally do. What's about to happen is going to be a change from the norm. So let's try and bring it back to where it was before, which was in a good place. You could think of self worth a bit like that, where you could feel where if it was more kind of eternal, but because it's so subjective and because realistically it's kind of about how you feel in the moment and probably got much more to do with just how you emotionally feel as well as like other psychological notions going on that like that as a result I keep saying like too much um that as a result you sort of it's actually something that needs to be both paid attention to in the larger scale, but to an extent from time to time there's almost this you don't need to like always feel good all the time, if that makes sense. Like it's not
Yeah.
necessary for you to live, for you to survive, for you to generally feel good about what you're doing. Obviously things like jobs and stuff and hobbies can provide that sense of satisfaction and so on, which can feel good over a span of time. And so that's why those are helpful. But if you are if something has happened and you're now stressing out a lot more and you feel like you're not performing as well as you normally would, to take like the self-worth or how you're generally feeling in the moment about yourself and like extrapolating that to be how you are as a person in all aspects and going forward is is a bad thing to do, right? Or is it bad it's a bad like start, I guess, because it's so ever changing and there's a word for this. I'll try and find it while we're talking about it, but it's a very good word to describe what
Yeah.
I mean.
Because I always think about events when it comes to self worth. For me, there's like a really sharp, like I get this really sharp anxiety pain, and I kind of feel it crumbling away from me. It's like, I can't think of a nice way to describe it. It's like a really crumbly cheese. It just kind of dissolves around you, and that's how it feels to me. It feels like everything just erodes away, and you're very, very raw in that moment, and it takes like a lot from you. And you have to then build it back up. But it is a mission because I never really know where to start to build back up self worth. It just kind of happens naturally. I don't ever seek out going for it because I don't actually know what I'm looking for. People say, "Oh, go to the gym." It makes me feel better, but it doesn't make me feel like I'm worth something. Like oh, do your poetry. That doesn't make me feel like I'm worth anything. It just makes me feel like I have a cathartic release. but it doesn't actually make me feel like I'm worth something. So it's like,
The,
what do you do?
yeah, the weakness of that statement alone also is that you don't always perform your best in those scenarios. So if you're trying to go out of your way by doing things that you feel are worth doing and you're not performing that well, it it can create like a cycle of negative self-talk where you're seeing the impact of this. The impact of this is that you are performing worse, right? So you're going to continue performing worse effectively if you're just doing it for that. I don't think there's nothing useful about that style of behavior, like doing things that you like doing, for example. That does make you generally feel better, so there is the potential for that. But I agree that I don't think there's an easy, like, I don't think there's like an obvious way of doing it. I was going to say though, I have realized over time, and at least this is true for me, and I know this won't be true for everyone because people have very different feelings about social stuff. I find a lot of my self worth comes from from a feeling of alienation from other people, and me essentially becoming very subjective. No, not subjective. Very uh, like looking upon myself as a person and having nothing to like work off of. I will then essentially idealize everyone else because I'm not seeing them for who they actually are and actually interacting with them and stuff. So suddenly I will feel very alienated, very isolated, and then suddenly self worth becomes worse. But I do find that there are occasions now where I'm like, okay, I just need to talk to someone about this. I need to kind of be open about this, or I need to be like, or I need to say to them like, hey, let's do something that is it's not about having fun, even though that's definitely a part of it, but it's about having that kind of affirmation from those around you that do. We'll get into this a bit more later when we talk about like how we've come to our own feelings and senses of it. But that I feel like sometimes a lot of the time I have to affirm that
Yeah.
self-worth through some social interaction with someone, which I don't think is a bad thing on its own. I do think there are problems potentially to it, but I think that it's kind of a necessary issue sometimes, or a necessary downfall or flaw with it.
I was just shifting to the value of self worth. It is very much. I feel like it can be your self worth can be transferable to somebody else, and your how you feel about yourself is very much dependent on how somebody feels about you as well. And as we discussed the social settings we've been in, and like how it feels when our self worth is crumbling, it's like it's not really something that we should be selling, but in a way we do, and we sell it off to sometimes the lowest bid as possible.
Yes, I agree with that.
Like there's I can pinpoint social media as a big example. I can be like, look, you have a million followers, but you don't really none of them mean anything to you, and you're posting things that you don't really have the heart in. You just do it because you know that people are going to give you gratification in the form of a like or a retweet or whatever the fuck it is. But it's very empty. It is very empty, and but we put our self worth into that. Oh, I lost a couple of followers, and then you feel like shit for the rest of the day. That you've invested, you've given them a part of you for nothing. It's not good. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I definitely think it can't be parasocial, at least like the means for achieving it. Like there's just because realistically, I think the relationships even by which you craft it or feel it, it has to be one which is like quite meaningful to you, and that doesn't mean it has to be in person. Although, like for me and you, I think it helps a lot more um, to have a more intimate relationship with someone, and that relationship you know be like that. But as a general rule, the most important element is that this is a person that you care about and that you find worth in as well. There's definitely an element of the people that can make you feel like good in this way have to be people that you almost see in that way. So if you look at someone and you don't really care about them, you might not really care about their reaction to you, negative or positive. I'm definitely working as I have in places where people do talk shit to you on occasion, or misunderstand things you do, or just want to be complaining. You, there are definitely times where like someone has said something to me, and genuinely at the end of the day, and after a while, like I realized it just didn't affect me. It didn't matter. But of course, if I was talking to you and we were having a conversation and you were getting on at me in that way, or if I was with my mum or my brother or anything like that, I'd feel very differently about it
Yeah,
naturally. Of course I would, because I care about the perspective that's talking to me. And there's definitely a sense of, I find you as someone who is worth caring about, or I find enjoyment with you, or I find some spark of you that I like, and it's getting that reciprocity about it that is quite. I think does a lot of that. It does a huge amount of the heavy lifting, if not all of the heavy lifting. Because really, when we're talking about self worth, I'm not quite sure what we're referring to, but it's just that feeling of I matter. Do you want to talk about this anymore? Or should we get to our own like more personal stories on how
yeah,
you've?
yeah, yeah. Well, you
Yeah.
actually segued into it perfectly. I matter. Yeah,
Yes.
like, but as you said though, like you mentioned about the idea of like who like people in the store being like dicks to you is one thing, but then like your parents, myself or whatever, being mean to you is another thing.
Yeah.
It's like figuring out that you actually matter is also being strong enough to block those things from people, you know? Because you're gonna have people who you don't like or people who you absolutely love, like maybe they'll tear you down and might be for the best that happens. Maybe they're saying something very like needed, you know, maybe your behavior isn't the greatest, but it will still hit you, but also strong enough to understand where it's coming from, especially depending on who it's from. If it's from someone who is an absolute dick to you and doesn't like you, then you can take it in one way. But if it's from someone who you know loves you and is there for you, then how are you going to internalize that without it corrupting your self-worth?
Actually, to that point, we didn't really talk about it, but actually, that negative, the top, like what we generally probably would call toxic more often than not,
Yeah,
of someone that you care about, or someone you trust, or someone you find authority in, giving
yeah,
you a lot of shit for no good reason.
yeah,
That's all about like you having this sense of self worth, whatever, being attacked constantly
yeah.
by someone that you actually care about the fucking opinion of.
Because that's the
So
thing. Like,
it definitely goes both ways.
that's the thing, because sometimes your self worth can get hit if something is said about you in a way that you don't agree with. For example, you know, like if I don't know, it's never this way, but let's say you were running late for lunch, even though I'm the one that's always late for everything. Um, and then I have a go at you, be like, "Come on, you're always late for lunch. Like, come on, why are you doing this to me?" Your self worth might take a hit, but I don't mean to actually hurt your self worth. I'm just annoyed. I'm annoyed that you're
Yeah,
always late. You
yeah,
know. And that's what I mean by that. Like there'll be people who love you and say things that hurt your self worth, but they don't mean it in that way. There's people who absolutely hate you. Like I've been in games. I've been bringing up sports a lot, but it's super relevant to this
yeah. Go for it.
because that's where self worth actually comes from. Like I'm Muay Thai. There'll be sessions where I'm like, I don't belong in this standard of like people. I'm getting kicked in the fucking head. You know, I feel like I'm just like I don't know. I feel like I'm a drunk guy off the street. You know, who said I could fight. Yeah, I feel like that, you know, and you get tossed around, you get thrown around, you get kneed, you get kicked in the leg, you get punched in the forehead, like all that stuff happens, and you feel like you're just not there. You feel like you're not ready yet, and you're in. And I have that a lot. I have that in many aspects of my life. You know, um, I mess up something at work. I don't belong here. I'm not good enough here. Um, Applying for jobs. I'm not good enough here. I'm not going to make it here. Everything I do, I actually put a limit on myself a lot by telling myself that I won't like do well enough here. When in reality, I probably would, but I never give myself the opportunity. And it's about understanding that not only like do you matter, but you matter enough so that you can implement a positive action on something.
Yeah, there's there's a really interesting element to this, like especially when you talk about like impact, where I think one of the things that really got to me, like obviously over the years, I have had conversations with people where I've realized, oh, actually, you do like me. I mean, it's actually incredible how long it was before I emotionally felt that my brother loved me. It's not like I had any particular reason to think otherwise, but genuinely, as an adult, I was still struggling with that.
Yeah, I
And
still don't know.
yeah. Yeah, that's a whole different thing. but I like, I have my, with Kestis, like, I think I remember us being on a balcony outside a flat, and we were talking to each other, and then I don't know how it got onto this topic, but it just came out that we were talking about like how I felt about myself and stuff, and I think I was even telling him like I don't know how I make friends because I don't see what anyone has to gain from being with me. I don't see what like I don't understand what I'm providing at all. Surely there's someone, I see these people that I aspire to be more like. Surely they should be with them, not with me, kind of thing. Which
Yeah,
one is just trying to objectify something that isn't actually objective, which is how people feel about other people. That's just not an objective thing. That's a subjective experience that we all have to understand, and we understand we're all different and stuff, and we provide different things for different people, etc., etc. Probably other conversations that can go into this more deeply, the objectification versus subjectification of stimuli. But um but what I but I remember like giving him all of this and explaining this, and he said, well, I like hanging out with you because we have good conversations, and
yeah,
and other things besides. But that stood out for me because despite the fact that I knew we would have long conversations that would much better than this episode has, but like tangent after tangent after tangent and so on. I could have started a podcast many years ago, Alex. In fact, we all could have because of the amount of
yeah,
shit that we've talked about and everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like not that we needed to, but and I don't know if we need to now, to be perfectly honest. But we're doing it regardless.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
it's there is a genuine sense that like when he said that to me, that then that impact the impact he could have positively on how I felt about myself, and realize, and same with my brother when he told me, like, when I said like, when I think I doubted at one point that he, like, I think I said like, I don't even know if you like me as a person outside of me being your brother or whatever. He's like, of course I love you, what the fuck are you talking about, basically, was the response. And it's like, and to think that I was ever at a point where any of this was in doubt. There were many times where I thought my dad, like, I didn't, was I enough for my dad, or was I enough for my mum? Was I enough for anyone? I mean, it's incredible to think that these things are. And I think that enough part is a really big element to it, to be honest, because what would be enough, and when would I achieve that, and how would I know that is up in the air. But that's, what could that possibly mean? How would I measure it, etc. The But that, I think what that ended up doing reflected onto me how I can do that for someone else. You know, the need to explain to others that you care about them and love them, or that you appreciate them and so on. I think it's just something that needs to happen, not because we're all sensitive,
Yeah,
or whatever, like, no like bullshit talking points. It's more just a case of, I think we all do better when we feel so open and honest with one another and comfortable enough to both accept and give praise that is sincere and well founded. That there needs to be that. You can't just have, and definitely for men, this is a more, this is a very interesting topic, like, of like male to male relationships and man to man relationships, of how we engage with one another. I mean, I say I love you almost every time that we hang up the phone at this point.
oh yeah, yeah, 100%.
So this is, and in almost every occasion, and we hug each other and stuff like that. This is our way. This is one of the ways I feel, anyway, that I am helping to provide that I love you and I appreciate you aspect, beyond just hanging out with you, which has its own elements, but it doesn't always tell you exactly what the nature of your relationship is. So it's almost an understanding of relationships that has to happen. But yeah, sorry, I've been talking a lot just here, but I've sort of answered quite a few different things and made my own point. So hopefully that's okay.
No, no, it's perfect. Like, again, like these episodes are where we talk about a specific subject and how we relate to the subject. We're not here to give you a university grade lecture on the subject itself. Which
No,
is
I'll
the
try
beauty
though.
of, yeah, well, we will try. Um, you know, get me on the Oxford Union. um,
Oh
but,
yeah, yeah.
um, but what I really want to like hit home in my point is the importance of it and how we strengthen ourselves. And And I mentioned that before. There was this idea of the idea of self worth and knowing if somebody loves you is super important. Like I struggle with connection in that regard. Like, I struggle to know if someone actually cares for me, not care for me. So it's always a little bit of a white like so. People, I don't know. I've had a few friends who say that they have themselves like rejection sensitivity, where any sort of rejection hits them really badly. I've
Oh
had multiple
yeah,
friends say it. Um,
yeah.
multiple friends, like I had a friend break down in tears because I said it was something really innocuous, and it's a very me thing to say. We were walking, and she was saying, "Oh, do you want to like come back to mine?" Nothing sexual, but I was like ridiculously tired, so I just went, "Honestly, I can't be asked. I'm dying. I'm real tired." And I had a big smile on my face as I said it. I was dying. I was really tired. Um,
Yeah.
and she looked at me.
You in that silly tired mood where you just have
Yeah,
a smile painted on your face, but you can't like
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Like effectively, I'm in that silly mood 24/7 for the past like 2.5 weeks. Okay, and it's like so she just looked at me. She went, oh, a single gangster tear came down her face, and I was like, oh Jesus Christ!
Oh.
And she
Uh-oh.
knew what I was saying wasn't malicious or wasn't like bad, but the idea of something her was so like a sensitive for her. It triggered that emotion. So even though she knew I wasn't being like evil or mean, what I said felt evil and mean. um, but yeah, and then like yeah, like what was even better is that I actually didn't go back to hers anyway. Like I consoled her, gave her a hug, but I didn't go back to hers because, as she put it later on, if she gets what she wants by crying, she will then internalize it as a habit. So, and like she's very aware of her mental health, so she's very aware that she has a very narcissistic viewpoint. It's really, really like good to see somebody who's aware of that side of them.
Hmm.
So she knows that if she can get something by crying, then she will cry. So she's unlearning that. I'm like, yeah, yeah that's cool. That
Oh,
makes
cool.
sense. Yeah, yeah. That's it with self worth as well. Like, there's people who I know, people who you know, who are like very confident within themselves and feel like they're worth a lot. And it's a beautiful thing to see. But whenever you see someone with self worth and that confidence not have it anymore, it is a scary look.
It's weird actually for certain people when they have those downturns where it I guess maybe from my perspective where it's like, have you never had this happen to you before? You know, where it's like their entire world is upside down and they're struggling and you're genuinely like, oh, you like it feels like
Yeah.
this has not been an experience for them. And that might be entirely wrong, but that's what it looks like from the outside, just because of the way that maybe just because of the way I'm interpreting it more than how they actually are, you know, externally, really.
But we look at each other like we always look like we don't like we always look like we're in a shambles. So it's like but we have like like you know friends who are like outside of this show and we look at them and they're like yeah everything's great and then we see them go through something and it's like yo you look like me fuck like you know
I
and
feel like we have like a sort of put together, like a shambles under a put togetherness where we're not really revealing our how we actually feel like fully, but
nah, I
we're not
think
afraid to say it to one another. So
yeah, I
we
think
get
that
the
like I
context.
feel like people look at us and like they probably go, ah, he has a podcast on mental health. I can just tell. Like you know, like I'm sure there's been days where we've gone into like social scenarios where we look like death. We look like death. You know, to quote Joey Diaz, you know, we look like we've gone through the ringer. We have that battle look on our face. You know, like we're prepared to eat shit. And it's like in reality, like what we probably need is some more assurances. And that's the thing with self worth. As much as I hate how much we give to other people can also increase its value. But yeah,
Yeah, I think the main reality, the main thing to realize is that there's no singular direction in which self worth changes. It's you absolutely, you know, someone can affect you in a horrible way. We're about to get into the next topic. Um,
yeah,
things people can do things that affect you negatively, or society can do so, but there is every possibility for the opposite to be true. That that society or someone can do things for you that better you so much, you
yeah,
know. And to the point of just to truly cap off in this moment about like why should we even care about this, or what's like the kind of motivating factor to build a society in which this is useful, or this is something we push to have be good, is that essentially it's kind of a cheat code, because when you feel good about yourself, everything feels easy. And when everything feels easy, there's so much more you can provide to others and to yourself, and you can create just some almost like sustainable economy of goodness, that continues to make itself feel better. Obviously, there's ups and downs naturally that will never change. People, you know,
Yeah,
biologically, physiologically, that will happen, as well as like different things will come up in your life. But that's a main aspect of hey, how do we improve how we generally all are? That's a really good one.
yeah. Like I always view it as this. I don't expect the world to adopt to those changes, right? We live in a world in which it's a very capitalistic world on every currency. So the currency of poor mental health is very much a major thing in the world. People profit off of us feeling bad about ourselves. And I say it sounds like a conspiracy theorist. Well, I'm not. We didn't land on the moon either, and the earth is flat. But here's the thing: every single news corporation says things and puts out headlines that are triggered to hurt how we feel, to make us feel lesser than ourselves, and to make us feel afraid and upset and panicked. Influencers on various platforms post pictures of themselves that are edited to make ourselves feel, insecure and inadequate about our body, as if our bodies aren't good enough for society standards. A lot of this is things that we can't really change, but we can change how we're affected by it. But
Certainly not
also,
on an individual basis, right?
yeah,
Like individually, there's not much we can do.
but we can build our own society. We have our own communities, and that's what I keep trying to bring, especially as a football coach and as like as someone who works in with children, but also who works in groups of different people. You have to be a team player, and if you can be a team, and you can imagine it as a society that is a team, your team is a society, and you can do something as simple as getting everybody on the same page to build each other up rather than dismantle each other, and try to build each other through constructive critique as a way to build somebody rather than destructive critique. Like, you could then build that society that we dream of for the whole world, but in a team of 11. And that is incredible. And do you know what those teams do? Those teams win. We have all these guys talk about success and being an alpha and all that stuff. But guess what? Like, they're always lacking something. They're never quite winning anything. But a
Hmm.
team that is really happy, oh my goodness, you can't stop them. Like, they're
Yeah,
just rocking with it.
and to your point, it can be so small, like the communities that we're talking about. I imagine family, even families essentially can be
Yeah.
like that. I've yet, I mean, I'm not quite sure. Maybe you felt this with my family or whether it's interesting because obviously other families feel different than your own. But have you ever like gone to someone's house and you just felt like, oh, this is really nice. I wish, you know?
Yeah, all of my friends, all of my friends, it felt like their families were like super like loving and like, well, not all of them, but the vast majority. Like, you stick out. Like my friend Ben, like and even that, like, it's weird because maybe I don't know if I can say this or not, but like, his family went through a divorce midway through our secondary school, and the family atmosphere felt the same.
Hmm.
So, like, because when you build a household that the atmosphere is loving, there is still loving happening, even though it's not in the like most harmonious of ways. Um,
Yes.
but we like life in general, like especially like, yeah, your family, like, again, like we spoke about your dad, um, episode, stoic men donate blood. That stoicism comes from love, though. It's not a I'm cool. It's a no, I'm just that's just who he is, but he projects a lot of love, and that might not be for the outsider. That is a comfort. That's what we love. Yeah, love.
Yeah. To be fair, I did have a lot of problems communicating with my dad for quite a long time, I think, because of it. But I think there's that element of, again, if that if enough have been communicated to me kind of actively, and I mean more importantly also if I had kind of been taught to understand it better,
Yeah,
to understand how my dad is, for him to basically explain himself and for me to explain how I am and stuff, and for us to come to an understanding through that. If I have a child and they're kind of more like my dad than like me in that respect, that's something that we're going to have to cover. I'm going to have to cover like, hey, this is I need something from you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to make me feel like, my child isn't suffering just because I'm not hearing from you that like you feel good necessarily. And
Yeah.
the same goes the other way, that like I need to obviously respect elements of them as well, and need to know exactly what I need to give them, you know?
Yeah, like
So
you know me, like I have my like similar with me and like my older brother, and it's always a battle because it's very similar to your dad in the idea of not saying much. Um, for me, not understanding where you stand with someone who like is supposed to care for you is scary, and
yes.
that was my whole relationship with my brother, like for forever. Like, it still technically is. Like where it's like you don't really know if whether they care, like you mentioned in the beginning with your own brother, but you don't really know what the outcome is, and you're worried about that relationship that in media and how it's portrayed is seen as always loving, constant loving, and you want it to replicate that, but it doesn't. Like I would see families, and like The Simpsons, and even that, like it was chaotic love, or you see like the black sitcoms, and you'll see chaotic love. You see, you know, white sitcoms, you'll see that same love. So it's like
Yeah.
you wanted that, but that is a very nuclear and binary way of looking at things. And life isn't like that because people work jobs,
Yeah, people have a lot to do. People have a lot on their plate. And people can't always be emotionally available. I do think it's an incredibly important skill to develop for being a parent, but but again, it's like I can't. That's hard to do, and something that I can't really, I can't. I'm trying to think how to describe this. I can't like give someone shit for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In a way, it's one of those weird scenarios where like it has so much to offer, and I do think there is an element we need to become more aware of. Is it called like emotional? God, I had this word in my head earlier because I was thinking I need to talk about this, but where like there's a word that's used to define the fact that people are like very emotionally uh without like there's very little emotional like fuck I need to find this word. It's not emotional isolation, but it's very similar to that word.
Dissidents.
Dissidence, is that? I'm not
I,
sure if,
I made that shit up.
no, it's
Um, we're gonna have to do a part two of this, aren't we?
no, I think no, I think we're getting close to the end, to be honest, unless I'm you're seeing further than I am. But
I'm seeing 49 minutes, but all we have is how do you feel about it now as a final thing.
yeah,
But
but
I
we
feel
can.
like,
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, we could do a separate. Yeah, I think we've done
yeah,
what's on the bullet points. Yes. Okay, I get what you.
I mean like a self worth part two later on. That's what I mean. Because I
Yeah.
feel like we've touched on things that could be expanded further upon.
Yeah.
But here we are. We're both. Are you 27 now?
I am indeed.
Jesus, you'll be 28 this year, right?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. So yeah, Joe's 27. I'm 26. Um, this whole podcast is us being in our mid 20s and like discovering life in a way, and our mistakes and our highlights, our lowlights, and things like that. How are we feeling about self-worth now? I'm going to rephrase the question and be like, and make it more, do we feel like we matter right now?
It depends how you ask it. Genuinely, I think it does depend how you ask it right now. Because I think if you said, "Do I think I matter to other people?" I would say yes. I think I matter to you. I think I matter to the people who love me. Like there was a whole long learning experience that came from me realizing, and now kind of, and not just realizing but remembering, like clearly recognizing day to day that people do actually care and so on and so forth, right? Not losing that completely. I definitely do. But if you ask me at some like kind of at a fundamental level, do I feel happy with myself? Do I feel I'm worth what I want to be, or like do I feel I'm worth like my own kind of self in a more personal kind of fundamental way? Not quite. And certainly that has to do with work, for example. Like ultimately, this is not a job I want to be in, and I want to be doing something else. and I want to be doing something that I feel is important, as well as being something that I can find satisfaction in the act of. At the moment, I'm like doing a job which is a necessary, job that needs to exist. It's not a bullshit job, but it's also a job which I find no personal emotional reciprocity from, and it's
Yeah,
one of those jobs, and I find little satisfaction in. So there's a mix of, and also there are things that I kind of think more about and care more about that are fundamentally good things to do or fundamentally good jobs to be a part of that I would maybe find more satisfaction with, which is worth exploring and pursuing. So therefore, in that respect, no, I wouldn't say I feel the self worth to the. I think I'm quite neutral in that respect, not content, but also not like happy. Not content as in like I'm below that, but I'm not to the point of feeling like really negative about it. It's just more like it's quite a strong motivator. It's quite a strong push factor, if you will. Shout out to geography. Um, to like uh to want to do something different, to change. Like it's a
yeah,
motivational factor.
yeah. Um,
And you?
oh dear.
You can be honest, man. Be honest.
What is the actual question? I
I mean, you rephrased it, so
know that tells you everything. So we're gonna take two steps to the rear. No, I'm joking. No. I think I want to matter, which is a problem within itself. So wanting to and actually matching are two very different things. So I feel like I'm in the space where I want people to care, but I also don't feel like people care. And then there's some moments where I go, everybody cares, and it's that conundrum that we're in. So I always feel like in between those two. Um,
yeah. Do you cognitively at least agree or like understand that I personally, for example, really care about you and think that you're an incredible human being? Is that something you like cognitively understand?
like just about, yeah, just about.
Yeah.
That's what you know, like somebody stalking you for ages does see though. Because like 4 years ago, I could say, "Oh yeah, Joe loves me." Now I don't say that. Like I struggled with the idea of people wanting to be near me because of just how, in general, like I think a lot of people have kind of done that to me over time where they kind of wick away at you, and then you feel like you're beholden to them. And also just how you grew up as well, like my family atmosphere. It was not horrific or horrible, but I don't have the most loving of families. So I would hear like other people say to their kids, "Oh, I love you." Da, da, da. That didn't exist for me. So then it's always I didn't get that, so that means they don't. And then as I grew up and I grew older, like that same thing still kind of like permeated and stayed there. But you know, yeah. Long story short, I know
The
I matter somewhere.
Yeah, I found the word, by the way, that I was looking for before. It's quite an important one, and I think it's I can look more into this for maybe next time when we talk about this a bit more. But emotional neglect is it is a is essentially not having enough. I don't think it's like pure. I think emotional neglect isn't like pure lack of. I think it's a case of. I mean, maybe that is too strong a term. Again, I'll kind of look up more into this because I know what I'm looking for, but I don't quite know the exact terminology. But for emotional neglect in the sense of emotional deprivation, that's what it's called. It came to me as I was thinking about like what exists between neglect and like enough emotional deprivation or um or being essentially not having enough of your emotional needs met. And it turns out that kind of like being malnourished or not having enough water, like generally speaking, as a society, most people don't drink enough water and most people don't eat in such a way, like healthily enough, that everyone is basically malnourished most of the time.
People aren't
Which,
hydro homies.
yeah, my hydro homies. People are generally speaking emotionally deprived or are very very much are malnourished in their emotional development or like what they were given during development and also like in day-to-day life. Like we actually have compared to what would feel compared to certain cultures or societies or whatever, and probably in terms of what our brain like kind of wants us from a social aspect, for most people. Again, obviously there's limits and tiers to this depending on who you are, but the need, the affectional need, the emotional need for affection is something that most people lack. And as a result, I think like not only loneliness can be tied obviously very clearly to this, but I think self-worth very much is within that, because we're not able to easily point to people in our own lives that and can say, yep, that's someone who I know cares about. Like I think there's very few people who, maybe not very few people, but I would be shocked to an extent if there was someone on my road, in London, where I could point to any of the houses and say that, oh yeah, they could point to one of the other houses on the street and say someone in there cares about me. Like, isn't that kind of crazy? Because like considering the spaces you're in, considering the closeness, it does seem surprising to me that there's such a lack of community in that sense that we really don't know. We don't have anyone like that to point to. Um,
Yeah.
and communities and societies and stuff can really help provide that. We don't want to get too much down the weeds of that, because there's tons of stuff I have ideas about in terms of nowadays and prior, and also just generally speaking communities that probably should exist and how we should try to organize ourselves generally speaking as a society. But like just in terms of like social engagement with one another, and that alone, like nothing else, nothing even like productive really beyond that, even though it has its own productive output. But just the fact that we have that is consistently something that we lack, or something that we are malnourished in, which means okay, we go into adulthood not even knowing how to understand the relationships around us. And one of the things I think is very interesting, and I'll make this point to the last point of this, just because for how I feel about this for myself, is I realize that the more I feel that I matter, or the more I feel like people around me have these relationships with me, the stronger I feel emotionally with it. Like it's like a web that's being or something being knitted. It's a fabric that is that the more lines of twine and wool and stuff, like whatever material you're using, the more that goes into it, the stronger it actually becomes. It's not something that's becoming weaker. Love is not making me feel weaker. Love is making me feel stronger emotionally. It means I can react when someone I know who cares about me reacts badly to me. I don't feel like the world is falling apart, because I know, okay, sometimes people feel that way. It's not about me necessarily. And I don't feel like just because they have no longer feel that way in the moment, that or that I'm getting a different sense of it, doesn't mean that like I'm now a shitty person or no one loves me. It's a bedrock, a foundation of self-worth that provides huge strength for lots of things that can happen to you. So I think it makes us more resilient as well more than anything else. That amount of emotional, um, that emotional care, I suppose, and affection.
Yeah. Um, I ain't got nothing. I ain't got
Yeah,
nothing.
I feel we're good for now.
Cool.
Also,
Just like that.
yeah, we didn't know how long this would go on for. We've made it a
Yeah.
long one, so great.
So guys, what was again? How do we end this again? Oh yeah. So
Rear.
email the show at sillywhalespod@gmail.com. This is the number 37th ranked podcast on Good Pods in mental health and health and fitness. Okay. This is an elite caliber show. Yeah. We don't take ourselves too seriously. This has been
No.
Silly Wales. We're gonna take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
Bye.